All right. Once again, welcome everybody to our Undone Life Together conversation. We do this once a week for 5 weeks. We have 2 more conversations after today. I can't believe we're already halfway through. But we are, as it turns out. And today we're talking about another hot topic. Today we're talking about prayer, which doesn't sound like a hot topic except when your prayers don't get answered the way that you think that they should. And then, boy, is it a hot button. Oh my goodness. And I've had a little
I think this is almost a hot potato topic, Michelle. I mean, this is one people throw out and then nobody really wants to talk about it. Nobody really wants to touch it.
Totally agree, which is, I didn't want to touch it, quite frankly, and tried very hard to avoid it myself. Yeah. But let me give you a little background for those of you who are joining us so you know. Monday morning, I sat down to do my daily Bible reading. And I sometimes use Charles Spurgeon's book, Morning and Evening. It's a classic devotional where you have a devotional in the morning and the evening along with a Bible reference. And I sat down to read Monday morning. The morning reading was Mark 11:22 and verses following. And it's that story about, let me see if I can open it up here. But basically where the disciples tried to heal a boy and were unable to do so. And so they asked Jesus, why didn't healing happen? We prayed, we were faithful. Why didn't it happen? And Jesus says, have faith in God, and then proceeds to heal the boy. And so there's this question of why do some prayers get answered and others don't? And it's so complicated. So I had just sat down to read this myself, and I wrote in the margin of my Bible, help me understand, ! Because I am so confused. I finished breakfast, finished getting ready, go to my email, and there's an email from a participant in Undone Life Together where she asked the very question that I had just asked myself. How do we, in fact, I'll read the email for you, so that way you all know kind of where we're coming from. This is what she said. We believe in a God that with one breath, one word, one touch can change everything in a moment. So how do you reconcile all the feelings along with your faith when God doesn't seem to answer? Or allows those who are unrighteous or not good to win in awful situations, or when you have friends in churches and so many people praying for you and with you and there's no answer, or the answer is no for healing or a job or for defending yourself in a legal battle or someone in your family battling health and diseases. And then she said, a friend of mine who recently passed away very young from cancer said, you Christians seem to just keep picking and choosing those sayings in scriptures to fit the situation. If things are awful, then people say in this world you will have trouble. But then when things are good, you choose the verses about victory and healing. She even said, the way your God has you go through all this bad stuff over and over, not really answering prayers for healing when you ask him, believing with all your mind that he can and he's able. It sounds like a cruel God to me, not the loving Father you talk about. If he can do everything in his power and loves you so much and cares about every hair on your head, then why doesn't he? Great question. You believe and say that prayer matters, but does it really? Doesn't that sound cruel to you? Someone once said it's like having the most amazing superhero as your best friend, but he doesn't choose to use his power to help you. Wow. Welcome to today's can of worms.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I have to say it's a very valid question. Yeah. And it's a very valid struggle, and one that I have wrestled with multiple times over the last several years, especially. And I would think if most of us are honest, if we dare to be brave enough to tell the truth, that most of us have had these kind of questions at some point or another. By the way, for those of you who are watching right now live, you can leave comments in the sidebar. There's a place where you can type a message. If you have questions as we go, please don't hesitate to ask them. You will rarely find a forum where people are willing to dialogue about these hard things. I want today to be one of those rare places where we can. So don't hesitate to chime in and offer your insight, your feedback, your comments, your questions, even your frustration or emotion or anger, because I would imagine this will bring up a lot of emotion, which it should. I mean, if we're living and breathing, it should create some tension. And I am slowly learning as I get older not to be afraid of tension. Tension's not a bad thing. So this is the email that came in on Monday, right after I had finished reading that story in Mark 11, ironic, to which I immediately contacted Sherry and I said, I'm just warning you, but our conversation on Wednesday might not be about rainbows and bunnies and daisies. So we've been processing and
I told you I've gotten
this.
several messages from women and participants in the study, and the term I'm using is that there just seems to be this frantic anger, and much of it is directed towards God. But there's also this desperate quality of, please give me something to hang on to. I don't want to feel this way. There's a lot of guilt and shame. And of course, shame loves secrets. Mm-hmm. And so just the fact that we're talking about this is going to dial down some of the shame. And I know you well enough. And of course, I've read the book. So I know you're going to talk about trust. I know you're going to talk about holding on to God's promises. But I also know you're not going to throw those out to us as cliches. So move us into, we know there's not going to be easy answers today, but I think you said you were going to give us some things to keep in mind and just some things to consider as we wrestle. So take us into this hard place and help us figure out some things that we can use as tools as we're wrestling.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great way to open. I do want to preface this conversation by saying that I acknowledge that so many of us that are participating and listening right now, we really want this conversation to end up with a 3-step plan for how you can be okay with all of the unknowns. And I want to warn you ahead of time that that's not what's going to happen. First of all, we are dealing with a God that's beyond our ability to fathom. We're so limited by our humanity. And so I just want to set the proper expectation that this is not going to cure all of your questions. This is not going to resolve all your angst. Gosh, if it did, wouldn't that be nice? And yet at the same time, I want a God far bigger than I can figure out. And so just understand that this conversation is to enter into a dialogue about it, but the wrestling is going to continue for all of us for the rest of our days. I mean, that's part of the process. It's part of being human and grappling with the very real and a God that's beyond our figuring out. At the same time, I think we can take some good steps today to maybe dig down a little bit deeper in our faith, and that's what I hope happens. Okay, so to give some context for what we're going to talk about, my biggest wrestling, most of you have read Undone, so you know a little bit of the background, but I'm going to give you a little more recent context after the book was published. So in March 2014, I was diagnosed with cancer for the second time. After 3 years of being cancer-free, 3.5 years of being cancer-free, it came back, which was very shocking to all of us. At that point, I had literally, I would say, thousands of people that stopped what they were doing and started praying over me. And over the course of February, March, April, hundreds, thousands of people were praying. I was getting constant emails, letters. Here I am. I make my living as a speaker, and I speak on faith topics quite often. So there was a sense of, Michelle's talking about God, so God should heal, right? Heal our mouth. She's talking about faith, that should come. On top of that, we had added 3 children to our family. And so some people even made the comment of, for crying out loud, God, cut her some slack. Here she is, parenting 3 more children. She kind of needs her mouth. Don't make her go through this again. So not only was I praying, my family praying, but we had hundreds, thousands of people praying as well. In the middle of all of that during the recovery, my dad was diagnosed and was told that he was terminal, and he died 3 months later. 2 months after my dad died, we found out cancer was back for the 3rd time. So we're talking from March until October, November. So about 8 months, 7.5, 8 months. Not only did cancer come back twice for me, but my dad died of cancer in the middle of that. And my 3 children who we had, my 3 youngest children who had taken in, have their own kind of challenges after dealing with a childhood of trauma. So all these things happening. And so a lot of questions came up for myself, as well as the people around me, as well as so many strangers that were praying. Okay, what does this mean? Why wouldn't God heal? Why wouldn't God do something about this? It doesn't make sense, especially for somebody who speaks and talks about faith things. then I spent a lot of time during this season reading through the Bible, and there's a story in Matthew 17 where where Jesus says very clearly, I tell you the truth, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible to you. Now that's very point blank, blatant. Like I tried really hard to find a loophole in there, but it sounds very much like a promise that whatever you ask for, it will be given to you. And so I'm like, I read that very literally. How do I reconcile that with so many prayers that have not been answered? And then, of course, the story in Mark 11:20 through 24, same kind of idea. And then I went through the Bible and also read stories of people who asked for prayers, made specific requests that weren't answered. Of course, there's so many where they made requests that were, but there are some that weren't. I thought of Hagar in the Old Testament, where she is pregnant with Abraham's child. Sarah, his wife, sends her away, mistreats her. So Hagar runs away. She goes to in the wilderness, and she prays to this God to somehow rescue her and hear her. And God hears her. In fact, so much so that Hagar named that place where God met with her as the God who hears. But even though God heard her, he sent her back to Sarah. So it was rescue, kind of, not really. The story of Joseph in the Old Testament, who was sold into slavery and was in prison for years and years and years. And how many prayers did he pray that didn't get answered? And he lost decades of his life, decades of family relationship, decades of career, decades of life and health. I mean, none of that was restored to him. Yes, God did deliver him at some point, but you can't get back the years that you lost. And then there's John the Baptist in the New Testament as well, who, forgive me, my phone's on. How poor. John the Baptist in the New Testament, who spent his whole life dedicated to announcing the coming of the Messiah. His whole life, he was so set apart. He lived in the wilderness. I mean, talk about self-denial. If there was any person that was righteous and holy as far as humans are concerned, it would be him. In fact, Jesus even said that. Among men born of women, nobody's greater than John. And yet John ended up in prison after Jesus kind of stepped into his ministry by Herod. And John even started to question where he was. Am I confused? Did I get wrong? What's going on? And no doubt, even though I don't know of any prayers in the Bible where John prayed for his deliverance from prison, it's very much implied that, the disciples were certainly praying for his release. And the result was John the Baptist ended up beheaded. So you go, what? It doesn't make any sense. And then I end up at probably the most profound prayer that didn't work, I guess you could say, is when Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, praying for if there's any way for God to accomplish his purpose outside of the crucifixion and the cross. Jesus said, please, please take this cup from me. And the Bible says very clearly he was overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. I mean, he was so consumed with grief and sorrow and weight of what was coming that his sweat was like drops of blood. So that's big, and God didn't give him what he asked for. In fact, just the opposite. So that tells me that, first of all, Jesus was as perfect can be, and yet still didn't get what he asked for. So there's something very profound about that we have to pay attention to. And then and with all these other examples, these were righteous people, godly people that didn't get what they prayed for. So there's something here for us to learn. And so aside from, I just threw out all these stories, but I'm hoping that at least makes those of us who are in that place feel very much not alone in our unanswered prayers. It's, if you are in a place where you have prayed for something and it doesn't seem like God is paying attention or answering you, you're in very, very good company. In fact, you're in beautiful company with Jesus himself. So now, how do we wrestle with this? What do we do with it? And so I have processed through this myself over the last couple years. I have spent a ton of time wrestling through this. I have I'm basically saying 4 considerations for us to take into account as we kind of wrestle through our own scenario. And so these are considerations, things for us to consider. again, this is not going to give you a 1, 2, 3 nice cookie cutter answer. But as you do your wrestling on your own, I think the wrestling, by the way, is very worthy. I think it's a necessary exercise. And so as you wrestle, I want you to take these 4 things into consideration. So the first consideration is our context. Our context. There's several different contexts that we need to take in consideration as we're wrestling with this whole idea of prayer, when it doesn't work, when our prayers don't get answered. First is our American context versus our global context. We are in a very unique scenario in the United States of America, as we are very much born into a position where we have the expectation of comfort. We have the expectation of getting all of our needs met. We are notoriously entitled. We have this sense of, I have a right to a good life. I have a right to a pain-free life. I have a right to everything that I could possibly want, and all my needs to be met and to be comfortable. This is very much the context we're born into. So we have a pretty powerful expectation and sense of entitlement about that. If you and I were born in India, our context would be very, very different.
Yeah.
If we were born in South Africa, our context would be very different. Have you noticed this, Sherry?
Absolutely. And you mentioned the word entitlement. I'm reading John Townsend's new book on entitlement right now, and it is just amazingly eye-opening. I'm reading it because of entitled people in my life. I've now quit reading it for that reason, because I'm being so convicted in myself.
I'm reading an excellent book. I've been reading this over months. I have to do it in bursts, but it's a book by Timothy Keller called Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering. And he talks very much about this fact that there is something very unique to Americans in our mentality and our expectations of the kind of life we deserve. We have to take that in consideration when we bump up against a prayer that doesn't get answered, because it is very much impacting our perception of God and how he does and doesn't respond, and our circumstances and how they seem to happen. So American context versus global context. The second context would be modern context versus historical context. And this is what I mean. Right now, in the year 2016, we have more access than ever before to everything we could possibly need to be healthy and whole, to deal with loss and pain. We just have at our disposal more access to alleviate or numb or minimize our suffering than ever before. Because of that, in many ways, we are much less equipped to emotionally deal with any kind of disruption to our status quo. Because we can run to the cabinet and get Advil every time there's a twinge of a headache, because we can run to the urgent care every time we feel the flu, we have very little tolerance for any kind of discomfort that lasts very long. And by very long, I mean sometimes like an afternoon is just more than we can take. And so some of that is we've lost some of our ability to just endure and withstand difficulty. Like any kind of muscle group, if you stop using it, you develop some atrophy. I very much believe we have become atrophied in our ability to deal with hardship. In this book, I'm going to read just a little section here because I thought it was very, very interesting. Here we go. Life for our ancestors was filled with far more suffering than ours is. And yet, we have innumerable diaries, journals, and historical documents that reveal how they took hardship and grief in far better stride than we do. For example, in medieval Europe, approximately 1 of every 5 infants died before their first birthday. And only half of all children survived to the age of 10. 50%. The average family buried half of their children when they were still little, and the children died at home, not sheltered away from eyes and hearts. One scholar of ancient Northern European history observed how unnerving it is for modern readers to see how much more unafraid people 1,500 years ago were in the face of loss, violence, suffering, and death. Another said that while we are taken aback by the cruelty we see in our ancestors, they would, if they could see us today, be equally shocked by our softness, worldliness, and timidity. Okay? And he goes on to talk about there's a doctor named Dr. Paul Brand, who's a orthopedic surgeon who treats leprosy. And he spent the first part of his medical career in India and the last part of his career in the United States. And he said this: in the United States, I encountered a society that seeks to avoid pain at all costs. Patients lived at greater comfort level than I had previously treated, but they seemed far less equipped to handle suffering and far more traumatized by it. Those are just a couple interesting thoughts for us to take in consideration as we wrestle with our own responses to unanswered prayer and our own prayer and our own suffering and pain. But we have to take in consideration our American context as well as our modern context as compared to others, and acknowledge that perhaps there is something about us and the culture we live in and the day and age we live in that causes us to be less equipped to deal with the struggles. All right. In addition to that, we have individual context versus community context. How do I say this without being completely blunt? But we are more me-centric than we've ever been before. Aren't we? Right? So we're very, very concerned about our comfort, about our own life dreams being accomplished. For example, if we pray and pray and pray to get a certain job and don't get it, we can get so angry, and yet there may have been somebody else praying for that particular job that got it. And we really struggle to see how maybe the no that we received is a yes for somebody else. And so we have a very hard time viewing our circumstances from a community context versus an individual one. So can we step back enough to see more of a bigger picture and what is good for the community as a whole versus how we individually specifically are impacted by it?
More cooperative than competitive.
Exactly. And even just slowing down enough to going, yes, this is a big disappointment. It's okay to be disappointed. But how might this be the better result or response for the community as a whole? All right. And then the last context to take in consideration here is temporal versus eternal. And you knew this was going to come up, right? We are so limited by time. And as much as even those of us of faith who have some kind of vision for some kind of vision of eternity, that there's a life beyond this one, the truth is we're still human, right? And we still see the immediate far easier than the eternal. I mean, pain, suffering causes us to really only be able to see as far as the nose on our face. And so it's very hard for us to have this eternal context. We feel very trapped by our temporal one. However, like 2 Corinthians 4:16-18 says, the challenge is for us to constantly be fixing our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. That's such a powerful challenge, and one that we have to take into consideration every single day. Okay, so the first consideration for all of us as we wrestle through this idea of prayer and why it works and doesn't work and what that tells us about God in the process is just to consider our context, because our context is impacting how we react to the unanswered prayer in our life. Any questions on that, Sherry? Any additional thoughts that you have? I know that was kind of long, but...
And I'm thinking what I would say to myself after listening to you is this is a way of saying, look at the bigger picture. Now, that's a cliche I don't want anybody saying to me. I don't want anybody saying, Sherry, get your nose out of your navel. But as I'm thinking American versus global, to think, I mean, when we're dealing with these unanswered prayers, I mean, we really, like you said, we can't see past the nose on our face. And all of this is you're encouraging us to look up, to look out, to look onward into eternity. And that's a thing that is hard to remember in the moment, because everything, so often I feel like I'm stuck in a corner staring at the vanishing point, and really need to be turned around to see that much larger context. And you gave permission to acknowledge the pain of it. But not to stay stuck in it, and not to, because then that obsessing on self just exacerbates the pain worse. It's not solving anything. It's not moving us forward, because there is no forward to go. We're just turned inwards in a very unhealthy way. So how about the second consideration?
Yeah, and I want to say you made a very good point here. If I'm sitting across from somebody right now who just lost their 6-year-old child, these are not the things I would tell that person. Okay, that's not the time or the place for
This is
it.
self-coaching.
This is for you and I as we are wrestling through our own spiritual confusion or lack of clarity on these things. This is not what you do when you are sitting with somebody in their grief. That's not the point of that. But as we try to deepen our faith and understand and grow a little bit, stretch ourselves a little bit, these are the considerations that we make individually, privately, not necessarily something that we do with somebody else unless they invite it. All right. So the first consideration is context. The second consideration is our bias, which is kind of similar to context, but we have to acknowledge the fact that we do come at our scenarios with a measure of bias. I mean, as pure-hearted as we think we are, we're just, we're human. We can't escape the bias that we bring to it. And when we read the Bible, we bring bias to it. When we pray, we bring bias to our prayers, all of that. Now, God's love is for us is bigger than our biases. So it's not something that we feel guilty about. It's something that we have to acknowledge as we wrestle through this. So what are our biases? It can be our circumstances. It can be our desires. It can be our own struggles and how they kind of bias us. I would even say physical pain creates a bias because when we're in physical pain, all we can think about is alleviating the pain, getting rid of it. So acknowledging that I have to, because I have pain all the time and pain's been something that's been big. I have to acknowledge that my pain may be clouding my perspective at times. And it's understandable, and I give myself a lot of grace, but just acknowledging it. And then again, our mortality. I mean, even those of us who believe in eternity and believe there's a better life to come, death is still a frightening thing. And so that sense of our mortality does bias our perceptions, which is why when we find out that we're diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, we become frantic to prevent death because our mortality does impact us. The way I thought of it yesterday, this is one thing that came to mind, is it's as if I took you, Sherry, I took you and put you in a closet in my foyer, my coat closet, and I shut the door. And you took your blindfold off and opened your eyes. And there in the closet, you made the assumption that there's no house beyond that closet. You see the four walls and the coat hanger and the doorknob. And to you, you make the assumption that that is all there is to life. Now, is that a fair assumption? I mean, there's a huge house outside of that closet. But you're very limited by your bias, by the four walls around you. And so I'm trying, as I'm working through this, to understand that I see four very tight walls around me. And to me, it appears that this is all there is. And what God is asking me to do is to believe that there's a big old wide house outside of that closet, and to trust him with that. So one quote, again, Timothy Keller has been one of my, by the way, at the end of this, I will give you all several different resources that you can write down and look into for your own research and study. But Timothy Keller has been one person I've spent a lot of time reading over the last couple of years. But he said this: our time frames are not in touch with ultimate reality. Our perspective on timing compared with God's is analogous to a 2-year-old's with an adult's. God has good reasons for making us wait a long time to see some prayers answered. And it just goes back to that whole closet mentality. That we have to understand that there's so much beyond the four walls of our closet. All right, so that would be the second consideration, is our bias, which we just can't get away from. That's just part of our humanity. The third consideration, as I'm wrestling through the subject of prayer, and I have to keep in mind as I'm trying to process it, is our aim, our ultimate aim or our purpose. As humans, as an individual, my chief aim, if I would ask you, Sherry, what's your goal with your life? What would you likely say?
I'm a sanguine personality, so I'm going to say to have fun. to be happy.
Yes.
Now, of course, I would want my answer to be very deep and profound and to glorify God and to do his will. But, the honest answer is, let's have a good day. Let's eat some chocolate, let's get together and laugh and laugh and laugh. That's what I really want to do.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of wrote down, if I would go out on the street and ask the average neighbor or American standing on the street, if I asked them what their chief aim is, they would say to have a good life, to be happy, and to love and be loved. I mean, those are pretty, and to be comfortable, to be comfortable, content, have your needs met as much as possible. I mean, those are pretty standard responses. And if you look at how we spend our lives and how we spend our time, those things are very much a part of the equation. To have a good life, to be happy, to love and be loved, and to be comfortable, content for the most part. And so we turn prayer into somewhat of in the process of achieving that, we turn prayer into somewhat of a magic act, like finding a lamp and rubbing it and hoping the genie is going to come out and give us exactly what we want. And those are our chief aims in life. And so the genie needs to give us what we aim for in this life, right? And then when it doesn't happen, we get really ticked off because we feel duped. We feel like, hey, we were promised this genie in a bottle, and now the genie didn't live up to his job. And dang it, I'm ticked. I'm not happy. This is unfair. I'm learning, or I've been convicted in the last couple of years that I've really cheapened. First of all, I cheapened prayer. But second of all, I've made God way too small.
Yeah.
I've turned God into somebody who should jump at my every whim and do exactly what I ask when I ask. And I've also been very demanding that he owes me an explanation when he doesn't do what I say.
Yeah.
And I've been very convicted about that, those several things. That is this really the God that I want? The one that just does exactly what I tell him and gives me exactly what I want and explains everything? Is that really, really, truly what I want? It's a tough question. So I told you what I think our chief aim is. And what I think God offers us through a relationship with him and prayer is bigger. I think our requests are too small. So I said originally that our chief aim is to have a good life. Through prayer and a relationship with God, the mystery of prayer and a relationship with God, I think the aim is to have an incomparable eternal life, far beyond this one, which sounds so cliche, but it's just, you either believe it or you don't. Before I said it's to be happy. I think what God offers through this whole mystery of prayer and relationship with him is to have a soul that's satisfied with a joy that can't be shaken. That's not temporary. That's not impacted by the moment, the circumstantial events of the moment, but that's this unshakable, unwavering joy. I said that the chief aim of our life is to love and be loved. God is saying, but only I can love you perfectly. That's what I'm offering. The kind of love that puts all other loves to shame, quite frankly. And then, we have this aim of being comfortable and content, and most of our needs met. And God is saying, I'm going to be that person that knows your needs before you even ask for them. Even the ones you wouldn't think to ask, and I will meet them. And so from that standpoint, you have to take into consideration our chief aim, and that perhaps our aims or our purposes or our goals are too small. And can we open ourselves up to the possibility that maybe there is something greater than the small things that we've been asking for?
I was thinking about this last week. My daughter lost her wallet. It had her driver's license, all of her money, her debit card, her social security card, her birth certificate, and her passport in it. Don't ask why. And so I wanted to ask some friends to pray about it. And I was thinking about, because you and I have kind of talked about this, and I asked them to pray. Sure, I asked that the wallet be found. That's what we really needed and wanted. I said, or alternatively, that she be at peace through the process of doing what has to be done. And the wallet has not resurfaced. But it has been amazing to watch her growing through the experience of making the hard phone calls and having to face the money. And I'm, as a mother, I'm watching this going, I'm not sure if I really want that wallet to be found. That was the easy, instant answer. But what I'm seeing happen in her, I think, is better than the Santa Claus prayer. And this isn't a life or death situation, so it's easy for me to say it. I mean, it's just material things and, identity theft possibilities for the rest of her life. But it really, in context of this ongoing conversation we're having, it's making me rethink a lot of things that I thought would be best for me, because I'm looking at this going, this looks like it's being awfully good for her right now, the growth that she's experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's easier when it's not a life or death scenario. Right now I'm thinking of, again, the mom who lost her 1-year-old, or the two people that come to mind the most when I'm having these kind of hard conversations are the parent who's lost an infant, because that's beyond, I just have no words for that. The pain is just so great. And then the other is the person who has dealt with significant and ongoing suffering. Those are the two that my heart hurts for them, because the pain is so acute, and it's so hard to understand any purpose coming from that. But like you said, when we start to see how more good can actually come from the lack of getting what we want, it helps us a little bit to process it. So far we've talked about 3 considerations. The first being our context, the second being our bias, the third being our aim, and that perhaps maybe our chief aims are too small or not big enough. But the last is the stakes. The last consideration is the stakes, and I truly believe we've lost sight of what's truly at stake here. When we are praying for a job, we think that what is at stake is the job, or maybe even the money to make a house payment. We think that it's the home that we may lose. We think it's the college that we want our child to go to. We think, gosh, when we're in the middle of a divorce, we think it's the marriage, which is a significant potential loss, right? So we think that those are all the things that are at stake. However, and this is so hard because I don't want to minimize those challenges. If we are viewing things from an eternal context, the only thing that truly is at stake is faith. The one thing that is most at stake in these situations and in these tensions is our faith. I didn't like that when I first thought that. It kind of ticked me off, quite frankly, because it seems like, especially for somebody who's had cancer 3 times and knows she may not live forever, it seems like what's at stake is the number of my days. And God said, oh no, that's not what's at stake. What's at stake is your faith. Peter said it this way, and I love it. Praise be to the God, Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade, kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may be proved genuine and may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus is revealed. I have read that. I can't even tell you how many times I've read that in the last couple of years. But I keep reminding myself that ultimately this comes down to whether or not I believe God is real. And whether or not I believe he's good, and if I trust him. Those are the questions I have to answer. If God is real, if God is good, then what's at stake has nothing to do with how many times cancer comes back. It has nothing to do with the trauma that my kids went through. It has nothing to do with the pain or suffering that may be ahead for me. What is at stake is my faith in the one that I claim to trust. That is what's at stake. And that said, boy, this is hard for me to even say out loud because I know what it can cost. If that is what is at stake, then I want to be the kind of person who can say, God, do whatever it takes to build up my faith. And that changes my prayers.
Mm.
Then my prayers aren't about healing anymore, are they? And that's one thing I've noticed for me personally over the last year, especially, is I still pray for healing. However, I no longer think that's the point. I had somebody come up to me at an event several months ago, and he heard me share my story. And as soon as the event was done, he came up to me, he pulled me aside, and he was almost frantic. And he said, I need to pray for you. Can I please pray for you? And he proceeded to pray for about 10 minutes for my healing, that all my speech would be restored, that cancer would never come back, that my ability to eat and swallow would come back, that my taste would come back, all of those things. And as he was praying, for the first time ever, I felt the slightest bit of rebellion in my heart. The slightest bit of, but I don't know if that's what I really want after all.
Wow.
And it occurred to me in that moment, and we all know that that was a God thing. It has nothing to do with me because I'm way too selfish for that. But it occurred to me in that moment that what God has accomplished through all of my losses is far more profound and beautiful and rich than what could have been accomplished in my comfort. And that's hard to say. And I know that for some of you listening to it right now, it just makes you mad. And that's okay. You're allowed to be mad and angry and all of that. I get it. But what God has done through cancer and pain and suffering and loss has built up a faith in me for the first time that I can say is unshakable. And that has nothing to do with me. That has everything to do with him. And from that standpoint, is healing what I really want? Do I really want healing? Or do I really want God to give me the strength to stand no matter what? So those are such hard things to talk about. One last story. Probably about 10 years ago, one of my children, I'm going to keep the details vague to protect that child's innocence, but one of my children had a huge dream. And this had been their dream for as long as I can remember. I mean, it was their dream. And we prayed about it and prayed about it day after day after day for years. This was a huge dream. 1 month after I finished cancer treatment, when I was sicker than I have ever been sick in my life, this child found out that dream did not come true. Massive disappointment. I will not, it was April 10th. It was in the middle of the afternoon. I remember exactly where I was sitting when I found out. Massive, huge disappointment. And I'll never forget the sound of them crying in the phone telling me that this dream they had had for more than half of their life had been ended with no chance of resurrection. I struggled with that. I have struggled with that so much because, first of all, I felt like, here I have gone through cancer twice. My dad died, all these different things. And really, God, you couldn't have this one dream. Your child's gone through so much. You couldn't have your one wish come true. However, well, let me just say, for weeks I cried over that. I probably cried harder over that loss than the losses I had gone through. It just seemed like the straw that broke the camel's back, kind of cliche, but felt like that. In the last month, 2 months, my husband and I have shared multiple conversations because what we have seen happen in the character of my child over the last 11 months has been absolutely profound. The work that has been accomplished in the character and integrity and heart of my child in the last 11 months happens as a direct result of getting a no to the request for that dream to be met. If God would come to me right now and say, "Okay, Michelle, if I could go back to April, I'll tell you what, I'll change. I'll go back in time. I'll give you the chance to choose. And you knowing what you do now, I'll let you choose whether or not they get their dream or not. I'll let you choose." I can tell you without a shred of doubt, I would let it play out exactly as it is, because I've seen the benefit in the life of my child. And this is, again, it's easier when we're not talking about a life and death thing. However, if God can prove trustworthy in that situation, something that was so devastating to all of us, and been faithful to my child and shown us what he can accomplish through the suffering in the life of my child, I want to be someone who can trust him in the other things too. Timothy Keller said it this way, and actually in his book on prayer, a different book, but still by Timothy Keller. He said, God will either give us what we ask for or give us what we would have asked if we knew everything he knows.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what he did in the life of my child.
Wow.
All right. We only have a few minutes left. I know this has gone as a longer conversation than usual, but I think it's just too important of a topic not to honor with some honest dialogue about it. So thanks for hanging in there with us. This will be posted online later, so that way you can watch it again, process a little more. I also have some resources for you. I mentioned Timothy Keller has 3 books I recommend. One is on prayer. It's called Prayer, Experiencing Awe and Intimacy with God. The second is Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering. And the third is The Reason for God. All of those are by Timothy Keller. John Piper has multiple podcasts on the book of 1 Peter, on suffering and joy and the commingling of suffering and joy in the believer's life. I highly recommend those as well. He's unafraid to talk about the hard subjects. C.S. Lewis has 3 different books that I recommend. A Grief Observed is excellent. The Weight of Glory is also excellent. And the Screw Tape Letters, which you, Sherry, highly recommend. And Sherry teaches on that, so you can ask her all your questions about the Screw Tape Letters. And then Philip Yancey has a book called Prayer Doesn't Make a Difference. And he has 3 or 4 chapters toward the end of that book that are phenomenal on this topic that we've been talking about today. So highly recommend those as well. All right, there's just a couple questions here that I want to look at. Renee asked, why is that as a culture? I'm assuming that she meant, why are we as a culture so preoccupied kind of with our own comfort? I think a big part of that is just technology. It's so funny. We think technology and we think modern conveniences are so helpful, but they have a downside as well, and that we just are all about our comfort, and that's just kind of part of our modern world. I honestly think it's become more of a limp for us than what we realize. So I'm assuming that's what you were asking, Renee. I'm not sure if I am clear on that, but hopefully that asks it. Darcy asked, let's see if I can add this here. How do you give yourself grace when you are in chronic pain? What does that look like? Well, we talked about that a little bit, but pain impacts our emotions. It impacts our biology. It impacts our everything from our blood pressure and heart rate to everything else. So I think we have to, purely from a physical scientific standpoint, acknowledge the fact that pain does change our emotional ability to respond, our physical ability to respond to circumstances. So being cognizant of that and acknowledge that, I think, is part of being gracious with yourself. When you're in pain, your ability to slow down your reaction time is significantly impacted. Do you have any thought about that, Sherry, as far as how we can show grace to ourselves?
I think so often we try to prove we aren't, and so we go overboard trying to pretend we're normal. And then we get into the point where we've gone so far that we're way overreacting. At least that's true for me. And so whenever I'm able to be much more honest, much earlier, and let the people around me know, then, and it's not that I want them dancing around me, but when it's out there honestly, then they're not dancing around me. When I'm not admitting it, then they're walking on eggshells because mom won't admit she's in pain, and we're not talking about what the real problem is. Because I live with chronic back pain, nothing like what you've been through, but I've got 15 years of chronic back pain in my life. And I've learned I've had to say, it's a bad day. Today's starting out as a 6. Well, it doesn't mean I'm excused for bad behavior or anything, but it just, everybody knows, okay, if mom seems a little on edge, it's not them. They're not having to question themselves and worry. They just know from the get-go. And they also don't have to coddle me. I'm not asking for them to tippy-toe or take extra care of me. But if I wake up with my pains at an 8, I may need some extra care, and they know to step in for that. So I just think admitting it early is a strength. Admitting to pain
Absolutely.
early on is a strength because everybody else can come in and be strong and know what we're up against rather than everybody pretending and guessing. Again, shame is banished because we're not keeping the secret.
Yeah, absolutely. So wise. I had something similar the last couple of days coming back from a very emotional trip this weekend where my son graduated from basic military training. And I don't have the ability to bounce back from either significant physical experiences or emotional experiences. It takes me longer to bounce back. So literally Monday and Tuesday, I spent a significant amount of time sleeping. Which in the past I would feel so guilty about that. But the reality is the only way for me to have the mental stamina ability to just deal with ordinary life, I need to acknowledge that. And so allowing myself the space to rest more, sleep more. I also am very careful to cut down additional stimuli. If pain is making me extra hypersensitive, cut down the TV and other stimuli that kind of deplete those reserves as well, and just being more aware of that for myself personally. So Darcy, thank you so much for your question, because I think it's such a valid one. Well, my friend, I'm not sure if we answered your question. We could talk about this all day. It is such a worthy conversation, a worthy topic. Before we go, for those of you who are in a place of deep grief and suffering, just know that I'm with you. I understand at least a little bit of how painful it is to not only endure the losses that you're enduring, but also to be wrestling with this God that you can't understand. I've been there more times than I can count. I do want to say, though, before we go, just because I'm in a little bit of a better place today, at least, maybe not tomorrow, today, that I believe in the goodness of God today more than ever before. Hands down. My faith is more grounded than it's ever been before. And if you're in a place where you can't believe, then maybe just hearing from me that I have seen that God can be trusted even when I don't understand him. And I'm learning slowly to understand that that mystery is not a bad thing. We don't have to have it all figured out. And to allow there to be a little mystery is okay. So just know that I'm maybe just a couple steps in a different direction than you, but know that I can believe enough for both of us that God can be trusted. And I will be praying for all the unspoken struggles out there right now, that somehow through all of this, even if the loss isn't resolved, that God will somehow build up your faith in a beautiful way that only he can do. So thank you guys all for joining us today on this conversation. So appreciative of your willingness to engage in a hard conversation with us. We will be back here next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, 12 noon Eastern Time for another hot topic. I'm really hoping next week hot topic is like cheeseburgers and chocolate, because these aren't easy.
Michelle,
we appreciate you guys.
Thank you again, though, for opening your heart to us and kind of role modeling. And I'm not trying to put you on a pedestal here, but for, again, many of us, we haven't had someone walk us through what this looks like or sounds like. We've seen a lot of denial. We've seen a lot of cliche or pushing away. But we've not had someone just open up and say, these are the thoughts, these are the feelings, and then this is where you've gone to scripture, this is where you've gone to study. And so I'll just speak for myself. You've given me not just a lot to think about, but you've given me a lot of practical things. And, you know, I'm not going to make a wristband that says, what would Michelle do? I mean, I'll leave that
No,
what would Jesus do? But I mean, this is the value of a good spiritual friend and mentor who says, this is what's working, because you've got street cred. I mean, you can say whatever you want, and I'm going to listen to it, and I'm going to be like, okay, I'm not arguing with that girl because she's been through stuff I don't want to be through. And so I'm going to take you very, very seriously, and I'm going to go read those books, and I'm going to go do the studying, and I'm going to remember these things when I'm in the midst of the hard situation in ways that all of the platitudes and the top tippy sermons have not been able to reach me. So on behalf of those who are here and those who will watch this later, thank you for your vulnerability in kind of laying this out as saying, this is a process. It's not perfect. It's not guaranteed. You didn't offer us anything that you can't deliver. But at the same time, I'm clear on who the good guy is in all of this. And I am very clear that if anything is happening that is good, it is God. And if it's not good, it's not him. And that came through so clearly in what you shared with us today. So thank you for taking the time and the emotional energy that it takes to walk through this with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate it. Just another example of how I would have never engaged in this conversation 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It took loss and pain and not getting my prayers answered in order to be here. And that is good.
Yeah.
So thank you all, everyone. We will see you next week. Have a great day.
All right.